accusations that most of these NGOs are engaging in subversive activities, terrorism activities. But when you talk to the individuals, you don't see anything like a terrorist. You don't see anything like an individual engaged in subversive activities. You only see someone who is going out of their way to help others in that regard. But then you never know. I do have Eunice Musime and Gloria Mgarura. Very good morning.
Good morning to you.
All right.
Good morning.
Let's get an account of government's critical approach towards NGOs. I'm sure it's not the Democratic Governance Facility that has gotten to, suffer this fate. Other NGOs have befallen the same fate. When did it start? Is it back to 2016?
Thank you. Thank you, and good morning, our viewers. I'd like to say that the suspension of DGF is not by surprise. We've been seeing a trend recently of shrinking space of civic space before even 2016, and this is directly linked to the fact that while Uganda was a promising democracy, for a while now, in the last few years, we've seen that democratic space has been shrinked. This is because we have a president who has overstayed his welcome. He has been in power for a long time, and therefore he's determined to hold on to that power at each and every cost. So what that means is that any institutions that are trying to expand the civic space, that are trying to promote democracy, are trying to champion democracy, will be affected.
So this is part of the regime's attempt to consolidate power?
Yes, this is totally part of the regime's attempt to consolidate power. It has nothing to do with major donors, it has nothing to do with civil society, and this is something that the citizens need to see as a trend. It's not about NGOs, it's not about donors, it's about us as citizens. Because civil society are the last safeguard. They are the last safeguard mechanism for citizens. And if that is taken away, it means that citizens are being left at the vagrance of the state.
And I was reading the literature and I noticed it is not the first time government has been critical of DGF. All the way to 2019, they actually asked DGF to, open their accounts and ascertain how much money they have in their accounts and how they are using it. That was all the way in 2019 when the registration of NGOs kicked off around August, as per the recommendations of the Financial Intelligence Authority. Meaning this was a disaster waiting to happen.
Yes, the trend since the removal of term limits in Uganda has been that we have been on a spiral in terms of our democracy. At some point we were promising democracy, we moved to a hybrid democracy, and now we are slowly spiraling into a clear dictatorship. And what does dictatorship looks like? It means that citizens' rights are being violated. We've just completed the elections. You saw what happened, live ammunition being used against citizens, arbitrary arrest, something which was post-1980 is now right in our faces. We've seen NGOs attacks. So many NGOs have been attacked. Their accounts have been frozen. They've been investigated. No single investigative report has come out to say that this is what happened. So even this suspension of DGF, would like to call upon government to ask the question, for how long has it been suspended? Is an investigation going to be done? And when will the report be released? Because we've seen that trend is that NGOs, their accounts are frozen, their offices are attacked, investigations go on, and no single report has been released.
Gloria Mgarura, we've seen such a callous trend on NGOs. According to the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders, who oversee activities of 149 NGOs in the country, they said their offices have been broken into since 2011. Why is there too much brutality towards NGOs?
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. Let's first get back to the president's letter that was released in the press, I think yesterday. The president states and explains, I'm the executive director of an NGO that operates across Africa in Somalia, Uganda, and now we're spreading out to Malawi and Liberia.
Mention the NGO.
Healy Africa. Okay. Just dealing in GBV issues with women and girls. But when you read the president's letter, he expresses genuine concern, which I want these people to consider, to put into consideration, you know. The president is saying the government of Uganda has no say or oversight on how the DGF is ministered, yeah? And then he further explains and says 500 billion is financing activities that are meant to subvert government. Yeah, he's crying. This letter is about subversion, which I think these people need to pay attention to. They may all not be involved in these activities that government is suspicious of, but probably a few of them in the racket, you know. And trust government. Government has its intelligence. I'm not a spokesperson for government, but I just want to remind NGOs, generally, you're a non-government organization. You're not anti-government. It doesn't mean you're raised up to fight government, you know, because the minute you bring in that attitude and approach, you're going to crash and have a lot of problems. I've been watching the trends from 2011 when offices are locked, computers are, I think, hijacked and taken away. It's all suspicion, which these NGOs need to wake up to. I'm not justifying that it was right for government to suspend. I'm just saying they need to put their ear on the ground and say, why is this happening? Because they've been free with this money for the last decade. They've been receiving it.
Gloria Mugarura, don't you think it could be political retribution? Because we saw it happen in 2016. NGOs were very, very critical of government. Then government instituted an NGO to oversee the activities of all NGOs. 2017, we saw Action Aid had its accounts frozen. In that regard, 2019, we saw the registration of NGOs. So they were scaled down from 14,000 all the way to 2,000. Don't you think it was political retribution for having engaged in activities in 2016 and now 2021? DGF having engaged in activities in this election, now after the election, they are being punished.
I would like to ask Gloria, though, that what does it say about the government if a whole facility, such as the democratic governance facility, can set up in a country without government involvement? Does that say that government was absent? So they are now trying
government
to...
was definitely, they definitely know
Gloria,
what has been going on.
Exhaust that,
so how can government be absent? How can government say they've not played an oversight role when a facility such as the democratic governance facility was being set up?
Gloria.
That's of course an excuse.
Right.
Yes,
government
it speaks to the weak institutions we have in this country. You can't say that a whole facility can be set up without government oversight. Not at all. This facility is being funded by different embassies. The French embassy, the Danish embassy. How does it set up? The EU, how does it set up without government playing its oversight role?
Gloria, you're exhausting.
So what does that say about a government?
Let me tell you. First of all, I've come here as an agent of peace and healing, because there's a lot of fighting. So you're bridging the gap between the NGOs and government. Yes, there is a lot of fighting going on in the atmosphere in Uganda. Emotionally, people are just broken down psychologically. Now,
so let's talk about political retribution.
Yes, I've come to breathe an air of healing. I do get funding from the UN, 101% for all activities, but there is no way I can get up and divert from my original goals. What is happening here that you're seeing between these NGOs and government is suspicion and lack of trust completely, because the man in power suspects you guys are diverting from your original calling. And this is really a serious call to NGOs. Come back and go back to your foundations. Let me tell you something. 99.9% of the NGOs operating all genuinely started with this heart to genuinely transform communities and make people's lives different. You're an agent of change, you know, but do it in a subtle way. Don't come out and, because we'll be as honest as we can be. I've seen NGOs criticize government throughout the year. Their work is just to criticize government on the media. And when I was invited for this interview yesterday, I told them I'm not coming from that angle. Yes. I want us to look at life in a mature way.
How do we harmonize the environment?
Yes, let's harmonize this. These guys can reconcile with the president. And by the way, it's just a suspension. It's not expelling. But their reaction is they fear that this is the end. No. The president has stated his facts and said, you guys, this and this, I'm suspicious of this and this, you are receiving this money, you know, subversion is coming in, meaning you're undermining my authority as the president. You don't respect me anymore. And let me tell you, that is the trend that is going on now on social media. There is just a generation that is abusive and insulting on social media, regardless of how old someone is. I don't know, we've lost our cultures and values as a people. You know, we've lost that unity and harmony that we had as a nation. People are just carelessly speaking on social media. I was listening, I was reading an article yesterday released in the news. Honorable Anite openly offended and insulted Honorable Chambade in front of the president in a cabinet meeting. Where have our morals gone as a people? You know, why are the young insulting the old freely and openly? I'm just very worried for our generation. I'm really worried. We cannot continue like this.
And also we could ask why the old are insulting the young, because if we are to look at the recent presidential elections, we had an old man and a young man. Who was doing the insulting? It was the old man. It wasn't the young man.
Eunice, let's be honest. Yes, on social media, there is a whole generation. If you don't support it,
I would also like to say that we need to go back to where were NGOs started. Yes. We have two kinds of NGOs: the kind that are set up to provide services, and the kinds that are set up to promote civil and political rights.
So you have the charities and those engaged in civic education.
Yes. So when you have NGOs that have been set up to promote civil and political rights, they are challenging government. They are calling government to account. And that doesn't mean that it's simply criticism and shouting. No, it means that you are acting as a watchdog over government excesses. Anytime you have a government that is not being checked, you're acting as a check and balance. You're amplifying the voices of citizens that are not able to hold the government to account. So there are several NGOs that are not simply providing services. They have been set up to act as a check and balance against government excesses, to call government to account. And those NGOs are not simply abusing government, they are engaging in law, in policy making, they're engaging in ensuring that laws and policies are implemented, they're engaging in monitoring the government activities. And because of that, we are able to have progress in terms of our development agenda.
No, okay, if their aim is political and civic rights, can they do it in a more diplomatic way? And
the viewer would like to know, Gloria Mgalura, do the activities of the NGOs reflect the realities or the political realities on the ground?
Not necessarily. That one, I'll be honest with you. As much as Uganda is in a, I don't even want to say we're in a crisis, we are not. As much as Uganda has its issues and people are not strong economically and are hustling and all those things, it doesn't necessarily call for, rather some NGOs are taking advantage of that and, you know, are blowing the trumpet out of proportion. I was following DJ Khalid on Twitter, and people from an opposition party were posting dead bodies on his Twitter account saying, please don't come to Uganda for the Mama Awards. People are dying. Our country is on fire. I saw a headline on New York Times, I think a few days ago, saying Uganda's election was bloody. People are blowing these things out of proportion. As much as, yes, NGOs, this is their livelihood. They make money from these donors and everything. But don't forget and don't lose yourself. Don't lose your values at the expense of peace in a country.
Maybe it was nationalistic journalism, but it was a bloody election. It was peaceful on polling day, but we saw pre-election violence. Gloria Mgalura.
Yes, pre-election violence was there. That's okay. And let me tell you, there are people that just can't believe that Uganda is this calm. You know, people expected our country to be up in flames, and they're just angry that this is not happening, you know. We need to bring back...
Especially people in the diaspora.
Yeah, and even locally, because they're the ones selling these stories out to the DJ Khalids, telling them don't come to our country, yet things like Mama Awards are going to put Uganda on the map, global map, rather. Now, let me tell you, NGOs need to reach out with an olive branch to the president and his government. For me, that is just the only advice I would give them. The man has expressed his suspicions in a letter. He has expressed his concerns. either write back officially and say, you know what, Your Excellency, we don't intend to do anything like this.
Eunice Musime, I moderated a host of shows in 2020 that were funded by DGF, Democratic Governance Facility. There were shows about civic education, there were shows about inclusiveness of women in this election and so forth, gender-based violence. There was nothing about subversive activities and so forth. Do you think government is simply afraid of how critical NGOs have been on the activities of government, and this is political retribution, suspension of DGF?
Definitely. It's quite clear that the president has stated it severally. I think sometimes we don't listen to the president. He says, I'm going to destroy. Actually, his words were, I'm going to crush all manner of opposition.
From 2016.
Yes. And what he meant was, he's going to ensure that no political party is functional, is effective. What he meant was that no citizen will be able to challenge his hold on power. And he's done that. So the attack on DGF is not simply an attack on NGOs. It's an attack on the citizens of Uganda who are beneficiary of these services that NGOs provide for them. All these people who are being arbitrarily arrested are being supported by NGOs that are involved in legal service provision. All these women who have been able to make it to parliament in their recent election, they've been massively trained and supported by NGOs that are involved in building the leadership capacities of women. So there's a lot that NGOs do that cannot be said to be subversive. My organization, Akina Mama wa Africa, we build leadership. We focus on enhancing women's leadership so that they are able to confidently and boldly influence power. How subversive is that? So my colleague here, Gloria, I'm actually not sure if she's from an NGO, because she keeps saying...
Really African.
Yeah, she keeps saying that these people and the president, these people and the president. One of the things that we know clearly is that there are certain NGOs that are also set up by government as pseudo-NGOs. We call them GONGOS, government NGOs. Those are not NGOs. Because
GONGOS, yes, pseudo-NGOs created by government. For what purpose?
To present alternative to real NGOs. So they are fake NGOs. So it's so easy for Gloria to come here and say, these people here and the government. I'm going to act as a peacemaker. These people and government. So it's important to listen to people when they are speaking, because you pick up their intention, you pick up their purpose. So do not confuse real NGOs with a pseudo NGO.
Gloria Mugarura, please, instantaneous feedback. Is Hilly Africa a fake NGO? Are you a pseudo government?
We are not. We are 100% non-government, but that does not mean we are anti-government. Yeah, you know why I'm addressing them as these people? They're beneficiaries of the DGV. Gloria is not funded by DGV. I'm funded by the UN. Yeah, sorry, DGF. I'm funded by the UN. Yeah. So when I say these people, I mean their group that is funded by DGF and government need to do what? To attain reconciliation. She shouldn't say that I'm set up by government. For you know, this is the attitude that we are trying to break in Ugandans. Yeah, I am Gloria Mugarura, but she doesn't know that I'm originally from Kabera Maido, just married in Chigezi. You know, she will assume just because my name sounds Western, I'm probably set up by the first family. Not at all. Not at all.
Very contentious conversation I'm having with Gloria Mugarura and Eunice Musime. When we return, I want us to talk about whether or not blacklist suspend the activities of any NGO. Fast forward in 2017, Action Aid saw its accounts frozen on the account that they were actually engaged in money laundering activities. That account was opened several months later. And in 2019, around August, the Financial Intelligence Authority wrote to 13 NGOs to establish where they are getting their money. And one of those NGOs was the Democratic Governance Facility. So this is not the first time government has been critical of this NGO and its activities within Uganda. Now, Gloria Mugarura, was banning of DGF the only option?
Can I just make a correction?
Let her first finish.
For me, I'm looking at this conversation from the president's letter, because that is where it all started from. The president expresses himself and says, and clearly explains why he's suspicious and not comfortable with how this money is going out without the involvement of local Ugandans.
I hear you.
He's calling for a few representatives
on the board.
Yes, from Uganda. Now, I don't want to say that it was justified, but I don't even want to say that suspending it was the only option. But I'm calling on the group that is funded by DGF to reach out and first pay attention to what the president is saying, because he's the ultimate authority in this country, whether we like him or not. Do you know that? He has the key to open for you or lock. Now, it's up to you to be mature enough and say, okay, let's sit around the table and negotiate. Life is about negotiating. Life is about negotiating. The minute you don't negotiate, you're not going to have what you want.
You negotiate when you agree that you've been engaged in subversive activities, but then these NGOs are saying that they are innocent, they're engaging in civic education.
Still, they should reach out and explain themselves and say, listen, Your Excellency, you were probably misinformed or your suspicions are wrong. These are our intentions, these are our clear activities. They should hand in work plans to him, because in the letter he says, unless I approve, you know, as in it has to first go back to him and he accepts for it to come back to their bank accounts. So they should make their work plans very clear and say, these are our objectives, these are our goals, this is what we are going to do. They should re-explain themselves. They lose nothing, really.
But in 2019, almost 14,000 NGOs lost their licenses and registration. We haven't seen them back into Uganda. We only have 2,000. Where was the dialogue then?
Now, you see, they didn't reach out to the president. I don't think they reached out to say, you know, you've shut us down, but this is who we are. There is no one. Museveni, I was born in 1983. I think I was about 3 years old. Museveni came into power when I was 3 years old, rather. Yeah? And there is no one I know who has knocked at Museveni's door that has not opened. There is just no one. We keep reading news. We are following events, you guys.
Yes.
We are not fools, even if we are working out there in the wilderness of Somalia. We know the events that are going on in Uganda. These guys should have risen up as the 14,000 and said, we seek dialogue with you, Mr. President. Come to Hotel Africana and we explain to you, why have you shut us down? But I'm very worried about the fight the DGF beneficiaries are having with the president. The emotional fight, the bitterness, the anger, the suspicion. I really want them to handle this with maturity. There is no reason that that fund is not going to be given back to them.
Eunice Musime, go ahead. You had a point of correction you wanted to make.
Yes, I just wanted to state that the DGF, Democratic Governance Facility, is not an NGO. It's a consortium of donors that fund
NGOs in Uganda.
NGOs in Uganda, and not just NGOs. They do fund government as well.
So don't you think, Eunice Musime, yes, it goes to the opium. Don't you think that is the main problem? You have a consortium of donors, yes, who are funding NGOs in Uganda. They have a lot of money. It is admirable. But then government, do you think, is critical of the fact that this money is going to NGOs whom the donors don't even know what activities they are engaged in, the same NGOs they are funding?
So it's a fallacy to say that actually that the activities that DGF has funded are not known. It's an indictment on this government to state that the DGF was set up without the government knowing what's going ahead. It's an indictment. It really speaks to the weak institutions that the government, it speaks to weak institutions in this state. How can the president now, the whole president of Uganda, decide that he's going to be involved in checking and seeing what NGOs are doing? What happened to his institutions? We have the NGO Bureau, which is our regulator. It's supposed to ensure that the activities of NGOs, we file annual returns, we file annual reports, and they just need to be capacitated to play their regulatory role. They are also funded by the DGF. They should be funded by government. Why are they funded by the DGF? They should be funded by government. NGOs should also be funded by government to do the work of ensuring there's a bridge between citizens and state activities. In other developed countries, actually their governments are funding these NGOs. So what I would like to say that this should not be seen in isolation. We should go back, and I don't want to get diversionary with my colleague here, Gloria. I don't want us to get diversionary. We need to view this in the bigger scheme of things. Where is the state of Uganda's governance?
So
what is happening.
Other countries are funding these NGOs, but the central government in Uganda is scaling down the presence of NGOs within the country. We would like to know why, from your perspective, and what you found out.
Yeah, and you know, these countries that are funding NGOs are also funding government. Actually, a lot of their money is funding the government of Uganda. Why aren't they scaling back and ensuring that we are raising domestic resources better? Why aren't we ensuring that all the money that leaves the country in terms of illicit financial flows is actually curbed and is used to the development of our nation? But I don't want to open it up that much. I would like to state that we should view this as a proxy indicator of the state of our governance, where there's no freedom of assembly. I don't know which country Gloria lives in. So where there's no freedom of assembly, there's no freedom of speech, there's no freedom of association. We've been seeing young boys who are supporters of Bobby Wine being picked up and incarcerated without their families knowing where they're going. Uganda, the youth, the reason why the youth are rising, because there's high unemployment. These NGOs that we are saying that should close are employing a lot of people in Uganda. And I'm not saying that because I'm an employee of an NGO. NGOs do not just set up simply because we want to get a lot of money from donors. No. Many of the NGO leaders, NGO staff, are there because they are passionate, deeply passionate about the causes that they are championing. Sexual and gender-based violence, ensuring that women are not excluded from the political space. Different programs. When you think about COVID-19, the lockdown, how many people were locked with their abusers and they could not find where to go?
I remember having those conversations.
Who was providing all that bridge between
funded
government?
By DGF.
Yes. Who was providing that bridge? Market women who are sleeping in markets without any, without shelter, without water.
Don't you think it's such criticism that might have compelled the leader of this country to actually suspend DGF?
So for me, I think that what has compelled President Museveni to suspend DGF is just but one of the ways that he's trying to hold on to power. So any outfit that is seen to be building certain momentum is then going to be closed down arbitrarily. Besides
consolidation of power, let's address his grievances. He's saying the board of the DGF is not constituted of any Ugandans. Address that.
That's not true, actually.
Go ahead. Enlighten us.
There are Ugandans who are part of the board of DGF. So that is not a true assertion. And like I've said before,
how many on the board?
It's an indictment on this government to have to state that, oh, this DGF, it hasn't just come. It has been here for quite a bit. So it's an indictment on the government to state that they have not played their oversight role. Why haven't they? That speaks to the weak institutions. Why isn't their oversight role being played? Why? Because we have a president who must be involved in each and everything. In a cabinet discussion, in regulating NGOs, he now wants to read all our work plans. When will he focus on work that is going to lift the millions of Uganda out of poverty?
Let me just, I beg to differ with Eunice. When Eunice says that government is hardly funding NGOs, that I don't want to say that that is true. Because when I came back to Uganda, we started work with girls and women in eastern Uganda because of what had happened during the lockdown. A lot of girls dropped out of school and all these things. And I knocked at the door of Honorable Frank Tumwebaze, the gender minister, you know, and I told him, are you aware that 13-year-olds are giving birth in Bugwere alone, you know? And he's like, oh, we can come on ground, you know? And I organized an event to commemorate the girl child. And I gave him a budget. I gave his ministry a budget. And it was approved immediately. And he instructed his team and said, give this NGO this money. We are going on ground to morale boost their work and strengthen. So my call and my issue today
and that's
is...
what I told you.
Let us finish.
My issue here is let's not say that government is not supporting NGOs at all. Government is, but it depends on your approach and your attitude. We are in a generation where attitude is everything. You want
your approach and your attitude. How critical you are of government.
Let me tell you, criticism,
it seems like if you're
healthy, if it's constructive.
If you're not critical towards government, it seems like you'll survive.
That
but
is
if
not
you're
true.
too critical,
that is not true. Criticism is healthy. I reached Frank Tumwebaze's desk and I told him, but how can you people be here when girls are giving birth at 13? You know, girls have dropped out of school. Can we go and make some noise and raise awareness in Eastern Uganda that a girl child values and matters?
Even the West is having problems. 5,000 pregnancies in Kabale.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the work we are rising up to do. For me, I believe in peace because Somalia has humbled me. You know, in Somalia, you cannot just find your way around and do things the way you feel like. It's a terrible war zone. You know, it's hostile environment. And we've learned to work with government, you know. We've learned to work with government in Somalia in harmony. There is nothing wrong with partnering with a gender minister for the agenda of women and girls to be fulfilled. I'm calling on the people that are beneficiaries of the DGF to reach out to government. Let me tell you, let me just conclude by saying this. Let me end with this. There is no smoke without fire. Let's not underestimate the president here.
Don't conclude, Gloria Mugarura, because we are still continuing the conversation.
Okay, but the man clearly states his suspicions in his letter. And he says there is subversion going on. You're underestimating my authority as the president. My government is looked down upon. These people should be mature enough as beneficiaries of DGF and reach out to the president and seek dialogue and explain themselves to him.
Here's why people are talking about political retribution. You had the accounts, the 10 accounts for UONet, Uganda Women Network, being frozen. You had the accounts of the NGO Forum being frozen. Those are 20 accounts for 2 NGOs. Now, the lawyer, Nicholas Opio, who was actually handling the case, Chapter 4 Uganda, was also arrested after he withdrew actually some 300,000 more than 300,000 US dollars. So we would like to know, if they were engaged in subversive activities, how come the leaders of these NGOs are still walking free? Mugarura.
I'll give that to you this.
Actually, it is for you.
No, it's for you because you've said there's no smoke without fire. The president is justified. And you know what I said earlier? I have learned to listen, and I've just listened to my colleague Gloria say, you remember what I told you, that there are NGOs that are set up by government, and I've just listened and gotten my confirmation. But I shall not be diverted. I would like to say that the allegations made by the president that NGOs are engaged in subversive activities, he has the whole security outfit that can investigate these allegations and come to a conclusion. Since 2011, NGOs have been locked down, they've been attacked, their accounts have been frozen. When you think about Action Aid, their laptops were taken, their phones were taken. Since 2011, the investigation has not been concluded. What does that speak?
And Action Aid is still working.
Yes, and of course, after taking the Financial Intelligence Authority to court, Action Aid, then their accounts were unfrozen. So NGO Forum accounts are still frozen. Uganda Women's Network accounts are still frozen. Investigations are going on. We do not know when these investigations will be brought to a conclusion. There have been so many attacks. Personally, the organization I work for has been attacked. We reported to police. They came, they took statements, etc. Up to this day, we've not heard from the police. So is this the institution that you'd want Ugandans to trust, that it's going to investigate independently and come up with conclusions? So if NGOs are involved in subversive activities, just as my colleague has said, that there's no smoke without fire, the president has the whole security machinery at his hand. Let them be investigated, expedited, and the results are released. So
of course,
then we can
before
confirm.
what we were saying, Eunice Musime, was government being so critical of NGOs, local NGOs at home. But then DGF being an international body, don't you think government is switching now sides? Take a look at the big fish who are funding the smaller NGOs.
So if you listen to the president very carefully during the elections, he was quite clear. He mentioned severally that these elections are being interfered with by foreign powers, by foreign donors. So it's just a trend. It's a trend, And I don't want us to get diverted. I think the conversation needs to go to how do we get back Uganda to its democratic path? What is required? We had started with the national dialogue process. Maybe that's one of the ways. It was also one of the things that the president, once he came in, he ensured that the process did not move forward. So we need this country. Yes, I agree with Gloria that this country needs healing, this country needs reconciliation, this country needs justice. There's no peace without justice. There's no peace for all the families that lost their loved ones in the last elections, and then you say, we need peace, we need healing. There has to be an element of justice. So the national dialogue had put down all the national questions that we need to address as a country. Issues to do with how electoral reforms, NGOs have been involved in a process of ensuring that we have electoral reforms for a free and fair and equitable election. That was not addressed. There are issues to do with corruption. There are issues to do with, yes, peace and reconciliation, access to justice. Justice, where is the state of our judiciary? All those are national questions that we need to address. So this whole suspension of DGF should be seen in that light, that as a nation, we have veered off the path of democracy, and we need to be honest, have an honest reflection on how we can get back to that path.
Gloria Mgarura, you have some political commentators who are now saying the re-registration of NGOs in 2019, late 2019, was geared towards cutting down or scaling down the number of NGOs in Uganda that would offer civic education, that would offer oversight during this election, and so many of the voter education activities that they would have been engaged in.
My stand still remains the same. If these people are innocent and have nothing against government, or the president was misinformed by his intelligence, they need to reach out, either write officially to the president, and your letter also circulates on social media and we see it, or reach out and explain yourselves. I don't know why there is so much bitterness and anger, you know, in NGOs in Uganda. I still don't know, because for me, how I understand
are they representative of the anger within their hearts, or the anger in the hearts of the Ugandans that they are representing?
It's not necessarily the anger in the hearts of Ugandans, yeah, because
so this is personal. The NGOs are acting on a personal basis. We are angry, so we are critical.
Now, let me be honest with you. I will admit that it's probably personal, because it depends on how you were trained for this NGO work. You know, people, unfortunately in Uganda, we have that much freedom that you can just wake up and go and register an NGO regardless of who you are. And you've not gone through some training. For me, I was personally trained by the American Embassy under a program called Generation Change. And these guys brainwashed us to approach things with peace, you know. I will sit here today and Eunice will say, no, you're pro-government, you know, because I respect power. In the American Embassy, we were never told, you must rebel, you must criticize, you must make noise as much as you can. We were taught words, reach out, you know, change the world. That is the mentorship that we receive. So I don't know if these people received that training. I have no idea. All
right, ladies, we've come to the end of this conversation. I'm going to give you both a minute to give us your parting shots, starting with Eunice Musime.
My parting shot would be...
Directed to the President.
Directed to the President. Dear Mr. President, Uganda belongs to all of us. That's a joke. My parting shot is to the citizens of Uganda. Let's not view the events of suspension of DGF, of closing NGO accounts, freezing NGO accounts, etc. as an isolated event. This is an indicator that Uganda is losing its path to democracy, and we can all play our part in ensuring that Uganda gets back on the rightful path towards democracy.
Amazing. And Gloria Mgarura?
My message is to the beneficiaries of the DGF: seek dialogue, reach out with an olive branch to the president and his government. Sit down and agree to disagree, you know. But to the other Ugandans, please, Ugandans, let's unite. This is our home. It's a home to all of us. This is our country. Let's love our country. Let's love each other. Remove these things of red, yellow, the shape of your nose, the size of your nose. Please, let's put that language aside. We need to heal as a people if we're going to go forward as a nation in this decade.
All right, Gloria Mgarura and Eunice Musimi, many thanks for having made the time to actually speak to NTV Uganda. Eunice was supposed to be somewhere, but she braved and she actually gave us hard time. Thank you very much, ladies. All right, you're still watching Morning on NTV. You can stay seated. We are going to go to Stephen Imbide, who is going to be talking to Flavia Biekwaso, the UPDF spokesperson, and this comes in light of calls from the Uganda Human Rights Defenders, who was saying errant security officers who are actually committing so many human rights violations should